My name is Kyle B. Dekker. I'm a playwright, actor, storyteller, theater producer here in the Twin Cities. I've been doing storytelling around the country for almost a dozen years now. And this show, normally I have a board with titles of my stories on it, but I did not want to haul that with me with everything else to Convergence. So I have the list of the titles here, and before each story I do, I'm going to give the audience 3 story titles, and other than the title, you'll know nothing about them, except maybe my child who has heard some of these stories before, and let you all pick. Some of these are silly and comedic, fun moments in my life. Some are more somber, thoughtful moments, and it's kind of just a mix of stories I have told at story slams, at fringe festivals, and mostly here in the Twin Cities at lovely venues like Strike Theater, which is, if you like spoken word and improv, it's one of the best places in the entire Twin Cities for such things. They did not pay me to do this. In fact, I bought this shirt, but they are one of the places that routinely gives me a voice for such stories, so I help them out. So I have about 15 stories. We're not going to get through all of them, so that's kind of the choose your own adventure part of it. We're going to get through as many as we can. So my first 3 story titles I have for you these are the options. We have Sales Benchmark, Paint Run, and Holy Klingon. So of those 3, which would you like to hear? Holy Klingon. All right. For those of you, some of you have seen some of my stories in the past. I grew up in a rural part of Illinois in a right-wing evangelical non-denominational church, which was quirky, let's say, and had a lot of weird things. And this particular church had a tradition of speaking in tongues, if you've ever seen such things, where people would claim to be filled with the Holy Spirit, and then they would shout words that no one understood, and people would say, "Look how full of Christ and the Holy Spirit this person is, isn't it great?" And when you're young and you're born in that, you do hold lots of faith, and you want to be the best Christian possible. And I was always upset. No matter how much I prayed and all, the Holy Spirit would never fill me. And then so I started writing down the words the people speaking in tongues said, and started looking them up, and I found out it was mostly gibberish, Latin, or not Latin, Jewish and Yiddish words. So they're just culturally appropriating and just shouting various Jewish and Hebrew words to say, basically you're just saying, "I love God" and stuff in Hebrew, but they were shouting it ways into a bunch of rednecks in Southern Illinois. It sounded like the Holy Spirit. Well, I said, well, I'm not going to let a bunch of people making up Hebrew words do that to me, so I'm going to use my own way to show how full the Holy Spirit it is. And one of my favorite television shows as a child was Star Trek: The Next Generation. And this is around the era where they started having lots of the Klingon episodes. And so this is before the internet was fully available, and all this is early 90s, so I started every time I could catch Next Generation on TV or syndication. There's a Klingon episode. I wrote down every Klingon word I could. If I recorded a VHS, rewind and wrote them back, and would make random sentences and phrases. So once I got confident with my Klingon words, now I don't remember many of them now, even though I live in a town where they do Klingon holiday plays every year. There's now 2 of them. They're growing, and they're both fun. So, you can watch Klingon, I'll Be Home for Kalis, and the other one is, I forgot what the other one is, but Honorable Life. There's literally 2 Klingon holiday shows in a town, and I should have lost that skill. But, so I learned, and so I would march out into the aisles of church and do the dance of the possessed and everything, and start shouting Klingon phrases over and over again, Kalis back, batlith, blah, blah, kapla. And instead of being called out, because all of that tradition and that religion is all a lie, it's all theater, it's all fake, I was eventually brought up on stage by the pastor as examples. Look at the Lord working through this child in great faith. And those of you adults who can't speak in tongues, look at this child who managed to do it, and you should be a good Christian like him. And the whole time feeling I'm going to go to hell for this, because I still believe that I had somehow fooled an entire room of adults that I could speak in tongues when I was just saying Klingon phrases from a VHS tape I recorded off the television. So that is Holy Klingon. Yeah. A lot of these are for short, like 5-minute competition shows and all. Some of them are longer. So Next 3 stories, we'll come back to some of them. I'm going to include sales benchmark, but then I'm going to add Beef Rib Hero and Page Turner as the other 2. So, what would you like to hear, Malcolm? Page Turner. All right. I am a child of the 90s and went to high school in the 90s. After being homeschooled a long time, I finally got to go to public school in the 90s. And knowing now that I'm on the autism spectrum of ADHD, though, but I was also a very smart, passionate kid. I was a very high-performing, high GPA student who always attended school, never got in trouble or anything like that. So come the year 1999, my senior year of high school, me and some other honor students who had also never done anything wrong wanted to do a senior prank. We're like, we finally need to do something. Shenanigans, but it has to be clever, it has to be detailed, and so we planned it like a heist. We had to figure out what we wanted to do. And in my high school library in rural Illinois, there was a mannequin named Page Turner who had a hand that could hold a book, and the librarians would routinely put a book, and like, it's sci-fi week, here's a bunch of sci-fi books, and she'd be holding Ray Bradbury or something in her hand. And we decided we were going to steal Page Turner from the library and return her at the end of the season. We wanted to be ultimately a harmless prank, but a memorable one. And the way we were going to do this is we had to get in the library sometime when there was no adults who knew us. And luckily, one of my friends, Eric at the time, whose nickname was Squiddy, so anyone who has a weird nickname usually is the core of shenanigans in any group. Squiddy grew the ability to grow a full beard by the age of 14. And when he grew it, he could pass himself off as adult age, even, and especially at 18. In my high school in Illinois, where I was from, every year in the late fall, they'd have teacher conferences and all, and training from teachers all over the area. So we get Thursday and Friday off as kids. I think the MCAs are like that here in Minnesota. It's a similar thing, Illinois' version. And our high school being a big campus, rural Illinois, but it was a township high school, the biggest high school in the county where a bunch of farm kids went and everything, even though it was a tiny town of 15,000. However, none of our teachers attended the conferences at our high school as teachers from other schools. So Squiddy and I and some others, we made him a fake badge and name. One of us might have been volunteering in the library to know what the name tags would look like, and maybe had put him on the roster and made him a fake name tag for a fake school we made up. And he wore that, and he wore a pair of of khakis and a polo shirt. He brought a notebook in his beard, and he put a hat to put down, and he pretended he was a teacher and sat through like 4 hours of teacher conferences in the morning in the library. And he just was quiet and asking questions, but it was in the library just meters away from Page Turner. Meanwhile, in my 1984 Oldsmobile station wagon, which had enough room to commit many crimes in space, because that's how old station wagons were, I pulled into the alley by the fire escape at the base of the outside of the building. Now, because our high school, this particular building, was built during the Hoover administration, the fire escape didn't have an alarm or anything. In fact, it was used to open to get fresh air because the building wasn't air conditioned. And so the door to the fire escape was open and fresh, and I sat there conveniently idling in my station wagon at the appointed time while Squiddy waited for everyone to clear out for lunch till he was the last person in the library. And then Squiddy grabbed Page Turner carefully under his arm, descended the fire escape, met me in the station wagon, which we put underneath a bed sheet in the back of our trunk like kidnappers in the middle of the day, not in the middle of the night, and we drove away. And we drove to my other friend's house, Josh, and he was the only child whose parents had good jobs, and so they had the disposable income. So he had an entire like shed for like all his outdoor toys, four-wheelers and stuff and everything that his parents never really went in, and we stored Page Turner in there. And that could have been the end of the story, but that's just boring. Page Turner is missing, big deal. And I had been teaching myself how to code HTML at the time, and so I went on GeoCities and made a website called whereispageturner.com/GeoCities. And we started posting pictures of the various things Paige Turner was doing. Here's her on a swing in the city park. Can you find her? Here's her with a bong and a Playboy. Because that's edgy when you're 18, 17, 18, you know. And various things, and trying to put clues and everything. And they were bringing, I remember multiple times, the dean of the principal, Dean Knutson, which is if you're making like an 80s or 90s youth film, teen film, Dean Knutson would be the name of the dean. That's like the most dean name ever. And he looked like a 1990s dean. He had like the high and tight military style haircut and a mustache. And he always wore a polo shirt that was half size too small, stretched over his middle-aged belly with a pair of khakis that always had like an ink stain from a pin on it, always with a clipboard and a mean look. That was Dean Knutson. His big thing was punishing students. Like that guy's like motivation in life was to get students in trouble. But he had his list of his regulars, right? He kind of focused on it. And several of them were in some of my classes. And he would march in and pull them out of class. And he'd come back and I'd be like, what happened? He grilled me for an hour about that freaking mannequin that got stolen in the library. I'm like, man, that sucks, man. I'm sorry they thought that. Because I'm not going to get caught, right? And me and my co-conspirators, Squiddy and Josh, we were tight-lipped. It was the only group of thieves, I think, in the history of mankind that had never ratted on her, or on each other. And eventually, the campus Crime Stoppers offered a $1,000 reward. This is in 1999, a $1,000 reward for the whereabouts of Paige Turner. And we never, ever gave up. But on the next to last day of school, at about 1 a.m, we drive up on my campus with the lights off. We turn off the lights in my station wagon. We put her up, and we bungee cord her about 10 feet up because we stood on top of my minivan onto the flagpole of the school and left. So then on the last day of school, Paige Turner, fully naked, as far as mannequins can do, is fully strapped with bungee cords on to the flagpole of the campus with everyone. Now, if it had been day and age, no one had cell phones, so no one took pictures of it. That's the other great thing. There's very few picture evidence of my crime, so even if it wasn't past the statute of limitations, I could get off free. And that was how me, the honor student, and my two friends, Eric and Josh, got away with the senior prank that literally sent Dean Knutson into offering $1,000 to high school students in 1999. No one got it because no one ratted. And also, they never give you the reward. They're just trying to get you to rat. All right. So, 3 more stories, choice. I'm going to keep Sales Benchmark, I'm going to keep Ball Dodger, and I'm going to keep Word Warrior. Those are the 3. Pick one of those titles, and I'll tell you the story. Yes, in the back. Ball Dodger. All right. So, as I mentioned, in my rural town in Illinois, I was raised in an evangelical church. And for most of the time, at least through the 5th grade, I was homeschooled because my parents didn't want me to learn things like the existence of gay people or evolution or those kind of things, right? But my mom got very sick when I was supposed to start the 6th grade. So they had to send us to school. So I think, thank goodness, I can finally go to public school and stop being a weird recluse homeschooler. But my parents weren't that forgiving. Instead, they sent me and my sister to the Christian Academy at the Baptist Temple, a private Baptist school, where they also made sure we didn't learn about the existence of gay people and evolution and other things. And it was not a place at that time. I had read through our entire encyclopedia collection twice. Yeah, there's no signs I was on the autism spectrum even at that age. And I was very sorry, routinely just corrected the wrong things they taught us. But the most horrible thing about the Christian Academy at the Baptist Temple was physical education class. So physical education class was basically an excuse to give the man who owned the school and the church, who's the pastor, his son, who got a degree in divinity from Oral Roberts University and was like a bench player on the basketball team, gave him excuse to give his son a high-paying job as the PE teacher because, there's never any financial impropriety in these nonprofit churches, right? And Pastor Reynolds and his son, Mr. Reynolds, the PE teacher, I think hated children. Like, every action and policy of that school, like, was just actively terrible. And Mr. Reynolds, the PE teacher, his go-to activity in PE class was dodgeball. And this is mid-1990s dodgeball, where basically I think the subtext of any PE teacher in the 90s making kids play dodgeball is fuck them kids. And the way the school was set up, basically there was one classroom for each grade, K through 6, and one teacher. And there's only anywhere from 5 to 20 kids, because it wasn't that popular of a school. And then all the middle schoolers, 7th and 8th grades in one room, and then all the high schoolers in a single room. And most of the high schoolers came in 2 ways in that school. They're deep in the religious cult, part members of the church, and they were kids who had been kicked out of every public school in the county, and this was their last stop before juvenile hall. Some of them were like 19 and 20, still trying to get their high school diploma. Some of them had like 5 o'clock shadow and like would get caught smoking cigarettes, and things. These are basically guys that were line cooks going to a private Christian school. And Mr. Reynolds thought it was hilarious to have the high schoolers play dodgeball against the 6th graders. So you have a bunch of 11 and 12-year-olds playing dodgeball against a bunch of basically men. And because the school was cheap, instead of using actual dodgeballs, which can hurt and everything, but they're designed to be thrown at people, they used just the collection of the balls they had, which was soccer balls and volleyballs and other things. And I remember this gymnasium was this big like Quonset hut style, like corrugated steel building, and the back walls were like the corrugated steel. And I remember in the basketball court where we had gym, they'd line up all of the balls, and then all of us 6th graders would immediately go to the back wall and just cower, hoping to dodge and not get too hard. And to this date, I still remember the whistle of volleyball and soccer balls through the air thrown by these grown men that would dent the corrugated steel behind us when we dodged them. And your only hope was to catch a ball, which would knock the wind out of you, and then get those people out and survive. And I just remember seeing a line of my fellow students, red, like puffy faces, eyes watering from their noses getting hit just on the side, just like basically crying, waiting for the game to get over. And we did that every day for an entire school year. And that's ball dodger. So when I do hear an evangelical or a Baptist saying they care about children, I'm like, do you though? Do you? I know that's a one-off thing in one church, but I wouldn't be surprised if my story's not unique. Yes, dude, I'm doing. Yeah. Yeah. Oh. Yeah. Hey, buddy, I love you dearly. You are my flesh and blood, but this isn't an interactive storytelling show other than choosing, okay? You can tell me all about it later tonight, I promise, okay? I love you. All right. So, 3 more stories. I'm going to keep one of them early on. We've got, I'm going to bring 2 sales benchmark print run, and then we'll add a new one, 642 miles. That one, new one, everyone's heard. So this one is a brand new story. This is a world debut of this story. Earlier this year in April, around 4 in the morning, I got a text message from my mother that my dad had been put on an ambulance to the Barnes Jewish Hospital in St. Louis, Missouri, which is about an hour from my hometown. He was showing some concerning signs and blood work and everything and came in, and so I was texting back and forth and everything. Later that day, test came back, and he has been diagnosed with acute myeloid leukemia. He's on his 73rd birthday, which is happy birthday to him. And normally with this form of leukemia, if you're young and fairly healthy and athletic, the treatment's very positive and everything, but my dad is 73 years old, and like me, he's very tall, but unlike me, he's very skinny, and he's gotten skinnier with age, so he doesn't have much body weight. He's 6'6" and weighs about 150 pounds. Yeah, he's a beanpole. And so they do the tests, they get him in infusions, they start chemo right away, and I make sure everything's like, is dad gonna, is it one of those things like, should I go so I can say my last words to my dad? Or, he goes, and things were stable. I talked to the doctor. I'm like, all right, I'll come by. This happened on Wednesday, Thursday. I said, I'll come down the following weekend and visit you and drive down. My hometown is 642 miles from my house. It's kind of a long drive. Same time, my parents have a dog named Molly. She's a 10-year-old black lab mix. And my mom is also not very physically well. My dad in the situation. They're suddenly facing a situation they can't care for their dog. And talking to my spouse and all, I agreed, well, part of my trip going down to see my dad also return with Molly, and we have a big 85-pound mutt that she'll get along with and help out and adopt the dog indefinitely till my dad is well enough to be reunited with his dog. So following weekend, I leave late, right after work on 2 p.m. on a Friday to drive down to my hometown in Mount Vernon, Illinois, 642 miles. And that's a long time to be alone with your thoughts when you have your dad with a life-threatening illness and everything going on. And I have an interesting childhood with my family. The evangelical stuff, I'm not like zero contact. There's been some reconciliation. I have a whole nother 1-hour solo show I've toured around the country called He Man's the Devil that's about. So if you ever see me remount that, check it out. But I'm thinking about these thoughts and everything. I'm trying to listen to my podcasts, my playlists and everything on the car, but my mind's other places. And I just start paying attention to the geography around me on this drive. And as I leave, the lakes and the forests of Minnesota into through the dells of Wisconsin and everything, dodging all the people driving 5 under the speed limit in the left-hand lane like Wisconsinites and Minnesotans love to do. I get into my home state of Illinois, which just turns to prairie, right? And I'm driving through northern Illinois with cornfields as far as the eye can see and wind farms and everything, which is a change. Like when I used to drive there, the wind farms are new, and I just had this realization that I'm like the wind farms and all this is something you'd put in the 80s in like a sci-fi movie of the near future and everything. And I live in the Twin Cities metro, which has all this art and growth. The city is growing. I have built this awesome found family here. And I was just thinking about I've built a life I love here, and I'm driving back to the life I left, right, to talk to the vestige of it. And as I get further and further through the state of Illinois to southern Illinois, where I'm from. Now, southern Illinois, for those that don't know, it is not prairie like the rest of Illinois. It is swampland. The glaciers stopped. You have the Ohio and the Mississippi River on either side of Illinois that form the point, and lots of tributary rivers that went through southern Illinois, which made huge swampland. And all the towns, like my hometown, were started. Typically, the name of the town is either named after the person who usually drained the swampland and then built a town there. So have you ever seen Monty Python, the Holy Grail, and the Swamp Castle? The first castle fell in the swamp. We built another one. It's like basically every town in southern Illinois is a swamp town. But then in the late 19th century and throughout the first half of the 20th century, they had a coal boom there. It's a big coal mining area and had very similar cultural things you'd get in western Kentucky or eastern Kentucky, West Virginia, that kind of stuff, coal mining. And it also had a huge rail industry. So there's lots of especially going to the southern United States, lots of big passenger trail lines would go through southern Illinois to go to Chicago, the Twin Cities, Milwaukee, Detroit, and all. And just because of the nature of where the Ohio, Mississippi, or the confluence of Illinois, many a train line went through. So huge industries of Pullman train car factories and other things sprouted up. And for a while, from about the early mid-19th century to the middle 20th century, southern Illinois was a booming blue-collar area where you could get a job and land was cheap, and you buy a house and raise a family. But then as rightfully so, we realized coal is pretty bad to burn, and southern Illinois coal is some of the dirtiest coal in the world, like even more so. So southern Illinois coal was some of the first coal they stopped burning because it's too expensive to do the treatment of it. It has nothing, they didn't stop using it because of the environment. They stopped using it because it's too expensive to keep using and make your profits as an energy company. So southern Illinois is a dying area. Towns are half or less of the population they were even 30 years ago, and you just see the decay as you enter the area. And I drive into my hometown. My hometown is propped up by a tire factory that has been there for 50 years making Continental and General tires. It's a Japanese, German-owned company that is very anti-union. They have never successfully unionized the tire plant in my hometown, even though about 30% of the adult working age population in the entire town works at the factory. That's how, so if that factory ever goes, the town will die. But you're seeing the signs of the decay as I drive into my parents' neighborhood. My parents have a beautiful 2-story house that was built in the 1960s and everything. It's big, but it's starting to decay as well. But even in that neighborhood they live, it has a mix of these beautiful houses built in the 1950s and 60s, 2-3-story brick houses and everything. But every third or fourth house is just a completely decayed, empty, condemned house that is falling apart. But 2 houses down will be one perfectly manicured and maintained, because the rot has seeped in little spots, and this is a town dying a slow death. And this isn't uncommon in lots of places in America that have, my hometown's a population of 15,000, predominantly white, predominantly Christian, right? And of course, when I'm in the area, I visit my dad at the hospital, I drive, I'm there for a couple days, I walk my parents' dog around the neighborhood so she gets used to me before we drive back. But there's lots of, if this is triggering to you, I apologize. There's lots of Trump signs and everything throughout these yards in this dying, decaying town. And it just made me think of how the people in my hometown are right, that things are worse than they've ever been for them financially. The cost of groceries are low. There's fewer and fewer good jobs. If you don't work at the tire factory, you work at Walmart or a gas station or a check cashing place or something that, barely keeps, or the $17 trees that are in town that destroy local businesses. And I'm not excusing the behavior, but when you're that group of people and everyone you look around you is a similar white face, you're in this dying town and you're struggling, and you have a demagogue type figure who says the reason you're struggling is because these people in cities that don't look like you, right? And the best thing the other side can offer is, well, the stock market's doing good, or I own a Glock that makes me cool and relatable. It's no wonder to me these people that have never moved out of my hometown, because there's a lot of that has formed my world experience. And if I had never gotten out of that town at 18 years old to join the military and met people from all over the world and got to travel the country and everything and go to college, I could have that limited point of view as well, by the luck of making that decision when I was 18 years old. And I'm one of those people that I've had both the rural American experience and I've had the metropolitan city experience. And they are both very much America and both very much like foreign to each other. Because I will say there's a lot of things for people who have always lived in a metro area that they always dismiss the yokel, the redneck, the everything, and realize that a lot of them are just people that work their asses off and they're just trying to feed their family and take care of it. And like us, we work 40, 50, 60 hours a week, and then we have to do the laundry. We have to feed our kids. We got to get our kids to practice and everything. We have no time to examine or do research. And that's intentional to keep us on our heels. And when someone says, well, the problem is those brown people in the cities, that's an easy sell if those people can't. And the only way I think is I can tell stories like this as someone who has lived in both places, because I see people in the cities here that work 50, 60 hours a week. They're trying to put food on the table. They're taking their kid to practice, and they're struggling too, right? And somehow I hope just to have these honest conversations so I can show to all of them, it's like, yes, we are all struggling. Yes, pockets of our communities are suffering and dying in different ways. My hometown is just literally decaying, actual physical decay. And in more metropolitan areas, we have a lot of our communities that are just actively being threatened, whether it's our immigrant communities or our queer communities, and everything are in actual threatened danger right now. We have actual decay, and we just have the existential threat of like the government using their power to harm people. But at the core of it all, it's us regular folks that show up every day, that make sure you can get a cup of coffee at the store, that make sure that, the phones work and everything. We're all caught in the middle while these grand people on the other have a debate on how much the millions don't go to us. And I guess the point of this story is when you can actually physically make that 642-mile drive and see the change and decay before you and back, somehow, I don't know, it's never going to happen in a storytelling show, but maybe I'll connect one or two people. Maybe we'll find that connection and realize that more of us are like each other than the handful telling us that some other person is the problem. So, yeah. Sorry, that's not one of the happy ones. I do have funny, silly stories here. So here, I will include 2 silly options. I won't tell you which ones, and 1 serious one. All right. So I've got Hope and Plastic, the Lego game, and Sales Benchmark. You have already picked one, kiddo, and you know most of my stories, so I'm going to let someone else pick. What's that? Lego game. All right. When I was about 10 years old, I was at my best friend's house, John, and his brother, Tom. John ended up becoming the best man at my wedding many years later, and Tom is still really good friends. We all ended up going to the same college together, even after they studied abroad, I went to the military, and somehow accidentally ended up in the same college together, really good friends to this day. None of us live in our hometown anymore. We're some of the ones that got away. But I would hang out at John and Tom's house all the time because their parents would actually let me watch worldly media. That's where I fell in love with movies because Tom's dad, Larry, was the one who showed me like the first Terminator movie and The Princess Bride and all these things I wasn't allowed to watch because they were of the world, right? But one grand afternoon in the summer, while we were just playing, we rode bikes and played outside a lot. John and Tom's uncle, their Uncle John, brought over this giant milk crate full of first edition Dungeons and Dragons books that were his as a kid in the early 70s. This is the early 90s. And said, hey, I don't play these anymore, but I know you kids like fantasy books and stuff, so I think you might like that. And we dove into them and started reading them. Like, there's a lot of cool stuff, but also all the math in here is really hard because we're 10. Like, the original D&D books, there were weird wargamer dudes who had very strong opinions on the way this game should be played. And we, as a bunch of 10-year-olds, go, wizards are cool, spells are cool, knights are cool, and rolling dice are cool. And that's what we pulled up. And we made our own game called the Lego game. Now, John and Tom's basically whole base, it was a finished split-level basement house. And basically the whole basement area was like their media center and then like a basement with toys. And the 3 of us combined had a huge Lego collection, and I would bring all my Legos over there. And at the time, in the late 80s, early 90s, the Lego castle set was a big thing and new, and we bought as much, every allowance, every paper route dollar we could, we put into the Lego castle collection. And we built a kingdom. Our campaign world became the basement. So the gray sectional couch was the Dwarven mountain range, and we built a castle on the bookshelf behind it that was the Dwarven kingdom on top of the mountain range. In the basement, we built a black dark castle that was the evil lich's castle and everything. And then we had a few other locations. We had taverns and all, and physically, and so instead of doing a mat and all, we would traverse, the game world was our characters traversing, and our characters were Lego minifigs. And me and my friend Paul were the 2 players, and John was the dungeon master. And we each had 2 characters, and we also didn't like all the classes. Paul played a wizard named Merlin and a knight named Lancelot. And I played, because Final Fantasy VI, which at the time was called Final Fantasy IV, had just come out, I played a thief named Locke and a ninja, because it's the early 90s, ninjas were everywhere. We made a ninja class, and a ninja named Shadow. Yep, ninjas still are cool. And we made basic rules. We all attacked with a D20 and had certain numbers to hit. The DM would just say, you need to roll an 18 to hit this boss, or a 20 to hit this one's so-and-so. The base weapon of the ninja was a katana, which did a D8 damage. The base damage of the thief was only a D4, but if I successfully snuck up on them, which we just, like, what do you do to sneak up on them? And if John agreed that I sneaked up, I would get to roll 3D4 for a sneak attack. The wizard had 2 spells, Magic Missile and Fireball. And he could cast them as many times as he wanted per day, as many times. And the magic missile did 2d4 damage, and the fireball did 5d20 damage. But to one target. But if he rolled more than 3 ones on the 5d20s, the fireball exploded on the wizard himself, and he took the damage instead, right? So it was just kids. And then the knight rolled a d10 damage and could ride a horse. Those were the skills. And we traversed, and I remember we spent the whole summer crafting this elaborate fantasy tale of Locke the thief, Shadow the ninja, Merlin the wizard, and Lancelot the fighter, traversing a basement that was a fantasy kingdom in our own minds as we defeated the evil Lynch and reunited the Dwarven kingdom and brought peace to the land with these rules we made up. And it really just taught me that as a experienced nerd culture, right, there's a lot of rules lawyering and other things, and people think the right way to do things, and I realized the best time is just having fun with your friends and accepting whatever stupid stuff they throw out, because if you do that, you're just going to have the best time of your life. So that's the Lego game. All right. And I am going to end the show with a piece of spec fiction I wrote, which is not a story or anything, because it's a piece I wrote. I'm currently submitting to publishers, and I got a couple lines of hook, and maybe it'll get published, so I'll give you a preview of the story. But 3 more potential stories. We've got Wall Memories, Eulogy Olympics, that one is not happy, and Beef Rib Hero. Which one would you like to hear? Yeah. Eulogy Olympics, okay. In 2013, which in the fall of 2013, when my child right here was literally about 8 months old, I was working at a restaurant as a manager and everything in Edina of all places. And I got a text in mid-afternoon after the lunch rush from my mother, who was informing me that my grandfather had just suddenly gone to the hospital very sick. And I'm like, well, give me updates and everything. Turns out he had went from perfectly healthy to being diagnosed with, you're gonna know something, acute myeloid leukemia, if you heard the story earlier with my father. But my grandfather was 83 and his outlook wasn't as rosy. He went in on a Tuesday and was dead by Thursday. But he didn't die in pain, and he was surrounded by loved ones, and he has a really amazing legacy. My grandfather, 83 years old, he had joined the Navy at 18 in 1946, just at the end of World War II, but he did it. He was a poor kid from Austin, Texas, who wanted to go to college. So he did that for the GI Bill, and he got an engineering degree and became one of the first electrical engineers that worked for General Electric and all. He helped build the electrical grid in downtown Chicago and planned the electrical grid in the John Hancock building, the Sears Tower. There's photos of him in a hard hat and all, with blueprints in the scaffolding of the John Hancock building. Those pictures. A lot of the modern electrical code my grandfather helped write. He had 3 children and 7 grandchildren who have all done various different really cool things. I've got a cousin who lives in Australia and teaches art to kids there. I've got another cousin who does tree trimming services in Boulder, but also takes kids on adventure hikes in Boulder, Colorado. I do my story stuff. I have a sister who's a dietitian for the SNAP program in the state of Kansas. He's a very kind man that just encourages grandkids to kind of chase their passions and just try and be the best at whatever. He never tried to direct us at a field, but I remember he had a speech, whatever you do, put in your best effort and try to be the most honest person you are at it. And so it was hard to lose him as quickly because I was going to fly down and see him and I couldn't get down. So eventually, instead of flying down to see him to say my last words, it was to fly down for his funeral. Now, as he has 3 children and 3 families, each family is asked to have one representative they choose to do their third of the eulogy. And my family was like, well, Kyle, you're a writer and stuff. You need to do the eulogy. And I'm like, yep, I'll do it. I have an idea of what I want to write. So I booked my flight on Spirit Airlines down to Houston, Texas from Minneapolis. And the soonest I could get the flight was on a Friday night for the service on Saturday. Because it was at my grandfather's church, and they need the church for Sunday service, even though he was a guy who literally helped build part of the building. Because in his retirement, he became a master carpenter. Go figure, engineer becomes a carpenter afterwards. But I get on my flight. Being Spirit Airlines, there was no direct flight. The flight was from Minneapolis to Chicago to Houston. I get on the flight, everything's good. I check in. I'm understandably not in all there with things going on. I'm also trying to write a eulogy in this, notebook at the airport in the plane, trying to distill my emotions and feelings of love of my grandfather into a 5-minute speech, which is not something that is easy. Land in Chicago, I go to get on the connecting flight, and Spirit has canceled it because not enough people bought the ticket. And they're like, here's a hotel voucher for $50 to stay in a hotel room to get a flight to Houston tomorrow morning. I said, the flight leaves tomorrow when the service starts. I need to be in Houston to deliver a eulogy, and it's going to happen, and you're going to make it happen, because luckily I used to be a paralegal, and also being on the autism spectrum with a liberal arts degree, I'm good at reading dense text and finding, no, you do this. Before I bought a house, I used to fight landlords and win all the time. It was one of my favorite things. I got so much free shit from our repairs in the apartments I lived in. I said, no, I'm flying for a family emergency. I bought a ticket for you to get me to Houston by this day. You're going to get me. They're going back and forth and everything. I'll report you to the FAA. I'm not and this isn't an empty, angry thing. It was like, I have the form right here on my smartphone. I will do it. Well, we can fly you into Dallas, which if Texas is a really big state geographically. Dallas is not that close to Houston. It's a good 3.5 hours away, right? It's about as close as the Twin Cities is to Duluth, but maybe even a little farther, or more like maybe Rochester or La Crosse, right? I'm like, and then you can rent a car and we'll reimburse you per the FAA rules. I'm like, whatever. So I get on the race to get to the connecting flight to Dallas, because it was taking off in minutes. They get on the flight to Dallas, get to Dallas at midnight Central Time, go to the car rental area, and most of the car rental places do not let you rent a one-way car, because I wasn't driving back to the airport even without a reservation. But eventually, the ticket agent at Avis, I'm like, all right, I explained the situation. He's like, I got you. We're going to figure it out. He's like, I can't get it too cheap because these one-way rentals are expensive, but I'm going to go through every possible discount. He's like, you're not a senior citizen. I can't do that. He's like, do you got AAA? I'm like, I got AAA. I'm like, I got 10% off on that. He's like, do you have a Costco membership? I'm like, yeah. He's like, there's another 10%. And then I go, oh, I'm a veteran too. He's like, that's 15%, my friend. And he was helping. It was the first time this whole thing, he just was like, to find another human at midnight in the service industry, just go out of his way to help me. And I rent the shittiest Ford hatchback Fiesta you've ever seen that has this angry, glowing, red display everywhere. Everything in the car was red because it was the sport edition. And I get on the road to head to Houston, and I get on Highway 35, which if you're from Minnesota, 35 goes all the way up, and I'm hallucinating from the emotion of my grandfather and everything, and I'm like, oh my God, I teleported back to Minnesota. What is happening? I had a panic moment because everything is dark and you just see buildings, and then I see a sign that says Houston, 211 miles or whatever, and I go. And I get into Houston at the hotel at 4 a.m., and my uncle had stayed up to make sure I got in the hotel because he had checked in and got in the suite and made okay. I remembered my suit, and I got it in, and I was able to deliver a eulogy in spite all of the obstacles put in front of me. Now, I hand wrote it in a notebook. I didn't put it on a Google Drive. I don't know. I don't remember a word I said in that eulogy. It was all a haze because I was just thankful I had gotten there and was able to deliver the eulogy. But I hope none of you ever experience having to do something as delivering a eulogy for one of your loved ones and then have the world throw every obstacle in front of you to prevent you from doing that. But sometimes even to do something you don't want to do. I didn't want to deliver a eulogy. That's not something you look forward to. But sometimes it's very odd how hard you'll work to do something you don't want to do, but it can be memorable, and it was worth it for a loved one. So that's Eulogy Olympics. All right. I'm going to do a really quick one that I want to share. It's one of my personal favorites, and then I'm going to read my piece of short fiction, and then we'll call it a show. I'm going to do the one I call Sales Benchmark because it's a fun one. We've had a lot of heavy stories. I'm going to do a light story. There's someone in this room that knows this story well because I performed with him at the Minnesota Renaissance Festival. And I've been doing that now for 10 seasons, and I love it. I'm a street performer out there. I play basically a dumbass who tells dad jokes and puns. I am Wart the Squire. And my first couple rookie seasons, they're required us to participate in a thing called the parade, where basically in the height of the heat of the day at noon, they make us march at prison, like this incredibly fast pace, and just walk by and wave at people and get so tired and overheated you couldn't perform for the next 90 minutes to 2 hours, which I hated as a street performer. I wanted to be out performing all the time, not walking till I was exhausted. So my first 2 seasons, I tried to figure out any bit I could do to make parade a bit so it wasn't, even if I was exhausted, the bit would be funny. On this particular day, I think it was my second season of the Renaissance Festival, I went and one of the wooden benches that are all over the things, I pick it up and put it on my shoulder, and I start walking to everyone watching the parade, go, "Ye authentic Renaissance Festival bench, my lord, 1999, or 2 easy payments of 15.99. And just most people would laugh, and I just started doing that, going to people. It was like, I'm trying to sell a bench, and I was just trying to sell a bench. No one was buying a bench. They knew it was a bit. Most people know it's a bit. People are smart sometimes. Eventually, this middle-aged lady with what I can only call a Karen haircut. I apologize, you can imagine it, right? But she was sweet and all. She had the sunbrim visor and everything, and she had a T-shirt, that said, like Chanhassen High School Bears Cheer Club or something on it, and a pair of khakis that was pulled up, past her belly button and everything. But a nice lady. She goes, "Is that really for sale?" And one of the things you do at Renfest, you yes and a lot. You don't ever deny or break character. I'm like, "Well, of course it is, my lady. Did I just not say it was for sale?" She goes, "How much is it?" And I said, "Well, it's $19.95 or 2 easy payments of $15.95. And I don't actually have change, so we have to round up or round down. You choose." She goes, "Well, I only have 20 cash right now, but I can do 20. I'm like, "Great." And I set the bench down and took the $20 bill, and I was about to walk away thinking, I think I did a crime, but it's a good story. She goes, "Well, am I supposed to carry it around the whole time?" Well, I'm like, "You bought it now, my lady. It's your problem." She's like, "Can I pay you to take it to my car?" "Yes, and of course, my lady, but that'll be an extra $15. Do you have any more cash on you?" And she goes, "I think I can come up with a little more money." She hands me another $15. And I put the bench, she's like, "We'll just go out and I'll get my hand stabbed and I'll come back." And I'm like, "They will stop me at the gate and not let me steal the bench. I will give her back her $35 and we'll both have a great story." And she's walking me and she's asking me, "What do you do in the village?" "Oh, I'm a squire, but I'm currently out of work. My last night, I said duck. In retrospect, I should have said dragon," and things like that, The bits and everything, and she's having a good time. And the scary people let me walk right past. They stamp her hand, I have the bench on hand, I walk right past. And she takes me out to her big giant soccer mom SUV. She opens up the back in the parking lot, and I put the bench in there. She gives me an extra $5 for the conversation, and I go back realizing I had helped commit petty larceny against the Minnesota Renaissance Festival for a bit that I profited off of. And she told me that throughout this, that she had built a nice garden outside and needed a rustic piece to be the centerpiece. So some of you, somewhere in the suburbs of Minnesota, if you're ever in a garden, you see a bench and goes, "Man, that looks just like a Minnesota Renaissance Festival bench." It probably is, and it's probably the one I stole. So, yep. All right. I'm going to finish with my piece of prose. This is called Exterminator Inc. So this is a big change. So this is one as someone who grew up blue collar and has a blue collar job and works with artists, I also love sci-fi fantasy, but all sci-fi fantasy and stuff usually is like kings and like I'm the general and everything. I'm like, well, what about a fantasy world about the blue collar people that keep things going? So I wrote this story the point of view of a world where like fantasy creatures exist and all, but they're a nuisance. So you just have to hire an exterminator to get rid of them. Like, yeah, I got a bunch of pixies in my garden. Can you come by and get them and kind of thing. So this is about one of my exterminator character that I'm hopefully turning into a novel on one of his calls. The old van resisted acceleration with a stutter and then a lurch. Cliff coaxed what little power the old utility van had left as it barreled down the road. Once bright white and emblazoned with professionally painted logo on the side, now it's a little more than rust for paint. The old van had faithfully done its job for years, a perfect reflection of its owner. The bright red and purple glow of the neon lights bathed the parking lot of the 24-hour storage center he pulled into. The lights proclaim safe, private, monthly rates, placed anywhere so anyone passing by could possibly look, even by accident. Cliff climbs out of the cab. The letters faded and peeling on the side read, "Ifs Escatrol," adorn the door and seen in the red glow. A harried man clutching a cell phone sprints from a shack near the facility gate. He looks like he's seen a ghost. If true, that'll cost extra, Cliff thought. Late night calls used to be Cliff's favorite. They always paid a premium, but these days they are more of a hassle. Rare and infrequent even. He preferred the sleep instead of the late night calls. But the client on the phone sounded frantic on this one, and Cliff never wanted anyone to worry over something he could fix. Frantic people seem to also be much more common these days. Nobody knows how to handle an infestation with grace anymore. The man ran up to Cliff, obviously stressed and irritated. It took you long enough. I called forever ago. Cliff ignored the man, walked towards the rear of the van. Rusty rear doors creak when they open, about to protest Cliff's rebuff. The hairy man jaw drops as a cornucopia of instruments of destruction are arrayed in the van. Stored meticulously in sturdy, homemade racks, ran an arsenal of pikes, crossbows, axes of every shape and size, wooden stakes, and even a silver-studded chainsaw. There's another rack of odd-looking devices covered in wires, vacuum tubes, and hoses. All showed signs of frequent use, but were clean and in good repair. Cliff looked over his armory until selecting a sturdy, well-worn but very sharp machete. He straps it to his belt and grabs a clunky electronic box from a shelf before closing the door. The harried man begins to speak. Cliff lifts a finger in silence. Then he flips several switches on the electronic box. An old green lit screen comes to life on it. Cliff extends the antenna and fiddles with the toggle for a moment until a nice even hum emerges from the device. Only then did he look up from what he had been doing to acknowledge the harried man's existence. You placed the call? Cliff asks. Yes. Could you have taken any longer to get here? The man blurts. 32 minutes, Cliff says. 32 what? 32 minutes. That's how long it took me to get here after you called. I told you over the phone it would take nearly 45 minutes, so I'm early. What the hell does that have to do with anything? The man says. Just the facts, sir. Would you please direct me towards the infestation? Hairy man looks there for a moment, unable to collect himself. Yeah, over there, unit 237, second row, left side. Do you have a key? Cliff asked. Of course not. We guarantee privacy. We only cut into them if the rent is overdue by more than 3 months, the man replies. So you haven't looked inside, Cliff frowns. Of course not. That's a violation of privacy. The man looked offended. Just trying to do my job, Cliff says. Oh, you'll know between the smell and the flies. I don't think it's normal. The man kind of shifts guiltily as he says it. Well, why don't you tell the cops? Flies are a sign of decay. Something that's already dead, I don't do. Well, not the kind of dead that just lay there, Cliff says. Well, there's some sounds too. Growls, actually. Growls? Canine, feline, other? Cliff asked, hoping to get more info. I don't know, man, just growls. I'm not an expert on this stuff. The man's unable to make eye contact with Cliff. The man leads Cliff down a row of corrugated steel units, their maroon doors stenciled with white spray paint on the numbers. The man stops several yards short of 237, unwilling to continue. Right down there on your left. I'm going to stay right here. The man is visibly shaken. He's hiding something from Cliff. Cliff shrugs, holds the electronic box up, and points the antenna towards door 237. An audible ping sounds from the device. Cliff frowns and looks towards the man. How long has this been happening before you called? Not long. The man looks defensive. Cliff shakes his head. Not long? A reading like this doesn't happen overnight. Tell me, how long have there been flies? And when did the growls start? The man looks sheepish and stares at his toes before answering. 3, maybe 5, 7 days at the most, right? And there were more gurgles than growls anyway, at first. Gurgles for a week? Cliff was on the verge of shouting. Barely a week. Before Cliff can berate him more, another ping blares from the device. This time it was louder, and then again, ping, 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 until it was just one solid tone. The device erupts in alarm. Cliff looks down at his feet. They'd grown suddenly warm. A thick, viscous liquid was now pouring out from underneath the door of Unit 237. Cliff quickly reaches for his machete and readies it in his right hand. He clips the electric box on his belt and reaches calmly into his breast pocket and produces a pair of safety glasses and puts them on. He places himself directly to the side of the storage door. A heavy thud impacts the storage door. Aluminum plexiglass construction distends from the force behind it. Another loud thud, a crash, and suddenly a fissure opens up in the door. The material crinkles like paper from the assault. For a moment, in complete silence, save for the electronic sensor at Cliff's hip pinging a rate so fast. And then the tearing through the fissure, a terror spews forth. A fleshy brown tentacle covered in scales and veins, dripping ichor. It smells of both fresh fish and rotten meat. A hum of energy fills the air in its presence. With a flash of movement, Cliff swings the machete, severing the tentacle nearly in half. It retracts through the hole of the door. An ear-throttling scream responds to the attack. Then, without warning, the remains of the door crash forward as if blown up, and it emerges. You can't tell top from bottom from the abomination. Amorphous pile of flesh, teeth, eyeballs, mouths, and ears. It screams again and again, its dozen mouths in a horrific chorus of pain and anger. Several of the eyeballs blink and focus in the red neon lights of the facility. Cliff once again raises his machete. Several eyes follow its metallic flash. The mass springs forward towards Cliff. He readies himself. With grace and agility that betrays his appearance, the abomination swoops around Cliff like a piece of anamorphic jello. Cliff ducks, and the creature makes a straight shot towards the terrified and screaming man behind Cliff several yards away. It's almost like the beast could smell his fear and vulnerability. The creature wraps an undamaged tentacle around the man and is now beside himself in terror. Words and screams he's never made before are quickly silenced as the creature starts absorbing the man directly through his skin. Cliff makes a quick dash around the opposite side of the storage unit, running straight for his van. He knew his time was limited, and that man is a paying customer, damn it. Cliff flings open the doors of the van, quickly with purpose and experience of someone who's done this before. There he finds it, a long metallic tube with a wooden gun stock carved in archaic runes of some kind, hanging next to a bandolier of glowing glass orbs. The device breaks apart like an old shotgun. Cliff places one of the glowing orbs in the breech, locks the action back, and runs back towards the commotion. By this time, the beast is tearing apart storage units, raining down aluminum and everyone's random belongings all over the parking lot. Cliff whistles. The beast twirls around. Its eyes focus upon Cliff, blinking in a cacophony of anger. They grow wide when they notice Cliff's weapon in his hand. They scream and move towards Cliff. Cliff calmly aims and lobs a perfectly timed shot. The glowing orb arches through the sky and lands squarely in one of the open maws of the creature. The creature freezes for a moment, then lunges forward and back and suddenly starts expanding and distending. A bright blue light begins glowing from its insides. Its skin strains and bubbles and begins to boil and inflates more. Cliff calmly takes a step back and crouches behind some debris the creature tossed around for cover. Then with a loud pop, the creature explodes and a hellish rain of flesh, ichor, and blood and mucus and bile fall all over the site. Cliff is nearly untouched, his instincts to crouch impeccable. A single speck of bile lands on his coveralls and he flicks it away without a thought. Cliff emerges from his cover, and there, in a pool of the most vile, sits the harried man, completely covered, the remains of the abomination clinging to his skin. He's shaking. Cliff returns to his van, carefully puts his weapons back, opens the cab door, and emerges with a clipboard. He walks to the man, hands him a clipboard and a ballpoint pen. Sign here for services rendered, please. The man reaches for the pen, shaking, and begins signing without comment or word. Initial here and here. Great. Will that be check, cash, or charge? 15% discount for cash. Cliff smiles. I'll pay with cash, the man says. Standing up, he slips twice in the ichor. The man counts several bills from a small metal safe in the office. Cliff double checks their account, signs a receipt, tearing the pink carbon copy off, handing it to the man. Pleasure doing business with you. Oh, baking soda and seltzer will get most of the stains out. Huh? The stains in your clothes. Should be able to salvage them. Oh yeah, thanks. The man is staring off in the distance. The man flops into a chair. Cliff turns to leave, and he stops, realizing he forgot something. He reaches in his pocket and produces a magnet. It has a cartoon image of Cliff killing a vampire with a stake that says, Cliff Supernatural Pest Control in bright yellow letters. He hands it to the man. Phone numbers and email right there. Call me again if anything comes up. Guaranteed removal or the return trip is free. You have a good night, sir. Cliff waves goodbye, absently whistling as returns to his van. The man just sits there, staring at the mess outside. Cliff's van pulls away. It rolls down the road as the neon sign proclaiming open 24 hours blinks out. All right. That's it. That's StoryBoard. I hope you had a good time. The stories. The next time you will see me on stage, I will be in the Minnesota Fringe Show with my child making a stage debut doing a physical comedy clowning mime show about farts called A Completely Serious and Not at All Comedic Review of Farts, Flatus, and Flatulence, a.k.a. The Fart Show at Mixed Blood Theater. Hope to see you there. Thank you.